Good evening, everybody. I'm Jeff Grimston. Tonight we're going to be looking at flexing a budget. Before we get started, first of all, can I just have a few yeses just to confirm you can actually hear what I'm saying? Excellent. Thank you for that. Now, one of the tools we'll be using during the presentation, we'll be asking a couple of questions along the way. Nothing too challenging, I hope, but just to make sure that you know how to use that, we're just going to do a quick poll. If we can just ask everybody to indicate which course they're studying, please. Okay, I think we can. Yep. Okay, so we've a mixture of advanced level and professional level. That's good. This particular example we're going to work through tonight is very similar to the kind of task that you will meet in an advanced level assessment, but certainly the techniques we're using are relevant to professional level as well. So hopefully you'll find this useful. At which point we'll move on now and start the presentation proper. And we're going to be talking about flexed budgets. Just first off, let's just introduce a couple of basic concepts to what we're talking about. At the start of a period, we make a plan of what we think is going to happen. This is what we call a budget. Of course, in the real world, as well as in assessments, things don't always go as planned. At the end of the period, we look at what actually happened and we compare that with what we expected to happen. And we calculate variances to explain the differences. Now, important point to mention, when we calculate variances, we don't compare what happened with the actual results with the original budget. We have to produce a flexed version. Let's think about why this is. If we produce and sell a different amount of product, we expect the cost of making that amount to be different to what we would expect for the original budget. And likewise, the amount of revenue we receive for a different number of units, we would expect to be different. Let's think of a situation if we didn't do this. Let's say that our production line achieves 30% more production than expected. Well, we're hardly going to call the factory manager to one side and give him a telling off, because I've got a question there, John. You should be hearing sound, Joanne. You should be hearing me. Everybody else is, I think. Back to the story. If output is different, we're not going to tell the factory manager off for using 20% more materials than expected if he's achieved 30% more output, or he or she, of course. So let's look at how a task might be laid out and how it might look. So a typical task might look something like, here we go, we've got a bit of data. Belton Racing budgeted to sell 200,000 units of the Sharpster bicycle pump, actually sold 230,000 units. And invariably in the preamble there will be some important information about the behavior of the costs, and we're going to keep this one visible in a minute. Other than fixed overheads, we're told all costs are variable, with two exceptions. Energy has a fixed element of £10,000 and supervision is a stepped cost. We're told furthermore that each supervisor can cope with up to 45,000 units of output, and the budgeted and actual data are as follows. So there we go, our original budget is for 200,000 units. There are the expected revenues and costs and the expected profit, and then we're given the actual units and the actual revenues and costs. So what do we do next? The instruction is simply to complete the table to show a flexed budget and the resulting variances. And it's at this point that most people go wrong. Here's our table. There's where we're going to put the flexed budget. There's where we're going to put the variances. Now we're going to keep that table handy. If we can pop that just to one side. Okay. Where people go wrong is, well, here are the steps that I suggest. Step one is we don't go straight into flexing the budget. We produce a standard cost card. Once we've produced the cost card, we use this to flex the budget. You can think of the standard cost card as the building block that the budget is made out of. And then thirdly, having done that, then we calculate variances. And the bit that most people miss is the first bit. So let's break down the original budget into its constituent parts and let's draw up the standard costs. So looking at our budget for the variable items, these are fairly straightforward. Sales £3 million divided by 200,000, that's £15 a unit is our budgeted selling price. Material 700 over 200, that's £3.50 a unit. Labour £4 a unit. Variable overhead £200,000 in the budget for 200,000 units. We expect £1 a unit. So having worked those out, here's our standard cost card. Put a working in the middle just as a reminder of how we got these figures. Sales revenue, there's our material, there's our labour, there's our variable overhead. So 4 items down. What's next? Energy. Now energy is a bit trickier. We've been told that it's semi-variable, so first thing we need to do is to take the total and split out the fixed element. We have a total of 110,000. Take away the 10, that leaves 100,000. Using that, we can work out the unit variable cost. 100,000 divided by 200,000, 50 pence a unit. If anybody gets stuck with these figures, we do have my colleague Alan, who is riding shotgun, and he will answer any technical questions that spring to mind if any of this isn't as hopefully self-explanatory as I'm trying to make it. So energy we've split. Let's put that onto our cost card next. 50 pence per unit variable cost, and then next thing we'll do all of the fixed costs. So there's our energy 10,000. Supervision we were given. Now supervision we weren't given. This is another tricky one. We're given that it's 90,000, but we will have to do some working with that in a minute. Other overheads were given as 180,000. Now, having created our cost card, what we're going to do is we are going to put the cost card that we've created down to the side, and we can use that to flex our budgeted figures. Start with our variable items. We've worked out that our cost per unit for sales revenue is £15, so we would expect, if we sell 230,000 of those, we'd expect to generate £3,450,000 worth of revenue. Material, we'd expect a cost of 805,000, labour 920, variable overhead, we would expect to spend £230,000. So far so good. Let's enter them in. Flexed budget, revenue, material, labour, and the variable overhead. Now we get to energy. Now you recall this is a semi-variable cost, so there are two elements to this. We have a fixed element of 10,000, and because it's fixed, it stays at 10. The variable element, 230,000 at 50 pence, 115, we would expect to spend £125,000. So let's put that onto the flex budget. Next job, now the tricky one, we look at supervision, which we are told is a stepped cost, and each supervisor can cope with up to 45,000 units of output. So what we have to do is work out how many steps and how much per step. 200,000 units in the original budget divided by 45,000 units is 4.44. And now it's your turn. Now it's your turn to put some numbers in. A question. How many supervisors have we budgeted for? And here's your chance. There you go. There's a box that you can type your answers in. So how many supervisors do we think the budgeted cost applies to? Give you all just a couple of minutes to answer. Got a few in. Still coming in. Okay, I think if everybody's done, I think we're all there. Okay, let's see what people say. Range of answers, quite pleasingly. Most of those are actually right, which is good. The correct answer is 5. Because 4 supervisors times 45 can only cope with 180,000 units, so we need a 5th one. In simple terms, the 4.44 is rounded up. And a popular error, I'm very pleased nobody put 4, so I might as well not bother coming tonight. Nobody's put 4, that's good, well done. Got one very low figure, one very high figure. Hopefully the working we've shown there is fairly self-explanatory. So in the budget there are 5 supervisors. We can now take that figure and we can say that means the £90,000 budgeted cost spread across 5 is £18,000 per supervisor. So far so good. At this point now what we can do is we can use that £18,000, we can scale that up to the cost for 230,000 units. Once again, divide 230,000 by 45,000, 5.11. So how many supervisors? It's time now for another poll. Okay, how many supervisors do we need to allow for in the new budget? Answers coming in thick and fast. Give it a little bit longer. Okay, I think that's everybody. Okay, well done all of you who said 6. Although 5.11 is not much more than 5 supervisors could only cope with 225,000 units. Even though it's not many more than 225, you would need the 6th. We always round up. This is the golden rule with stepped costs. You always have to round up. So our flexed budget, 6 times £18,000, we would expect to spend £108,000. Once again, the golden rule, always round up. I'm a great believer in visual memory aids. If you like, picture your supervisor, picture the last one sawn in half. That's really not going to work, is it? The supervisor does need to be left intact. Use that silly picture, if you like, to hang that memory on. And well done to all the people who said 6 there, which was most, which is good. Okay, let's put that on the cost card. Fixed overhead, our flex budget for that shouldn't be really difficult to work out because fixed overheads are fixed. But I'll bet there's at least one person out there tonight who's had some feedback from me along the lines of do not flex fixed overheads because they are fixed. We do get this urge because we're changing all the other figures. We get the urge to change this one, but it's fixed. It stays fixed. I won't ask to do a poll on that. Okay, so let's put that in. And finally, what we're able to do with that is we can work out the expected profit from the flex budget. There's our revenue, material, labour, energy. We expect on an output of 230,000 units, we would expect to earn £1,082,000 profit. So let's go back to our table, fill it in, and now we can start to work out the variances. Revenue. Our flex budget says 3450. Our actual is 3360. That's a difference of 90. Okay, time for a poll. Who thinks this is good news and who thinks it's bad news? So we have something of a split decision. This is interesting. This is interesting. Our flex budget says we should sell 3450. We've sold 3360. The answer is it's adverse. For that volume of turnover, we should be making more profit. Less income than expected is bad news. Okay, let's look at the next one. Put that one in first. There we go, it's adverse. Material. Our flex budget says we should have a cost of 805,000. We've actually spent 795,000. That's a difference of 10. And once again, oops. Pretend you didn't see that. I think, well, all credit to the people who are indeed pretending they didn't see it. Okay, overwhelmingly people are saying it's favourable, and if you spend less than expected, that's good news. For the amount produced, we've spent less than expected. Notice that each time, let's put it in, the comparison is not with the original budget. The original budget is history now. We're comparing always to the flexed budget. There we go. That's favourable because it's cost us less than it should. Next one. Flex budget says labour should be 920. We've spent 940, a difference of 20. Another poll. Who thinks that's good news? Who thinks it's bad news? Well, that's unanimous that time. Everybody thinks it's bad news, and absolutely our cost is higher than it should be. Higher cost is bad news. Now the next one, variable overhead. Original budget 200, flex budget says 230. We've actually spent 228, so our difference is 2,000. Do we think good news or bad news? Well, outstanding. Favourable it is. We've spent less than expected, and that's another unanimous result. Well done, everybody. Fill it in, 2,000 favourable. Energy. Budget 110, flex budget 125, the actual 125. There is no variance. Likewise, supervision 108. We spent 108. That's as it should be. Fixed overhead. Our original budget was 180. Our flex budget 180. Our actual is 190. So there's a difference of 10. What do we think? Adverse or favourable? Well, very quick. Yep, absolutely. That's adverse. We spent more than we expected, and higher cost is bad news. So once again, let's fill that in. Last job to do. Let's look at our profit. Now, originally we had an original budget to sell 200,000 units, make £920,000. In the event we sold a lot more, which should have given us a profit of 1,082,000. Plainly, looking at the difference in revenue and some of the other differences, things didn't quite work out that way. So we've a difference in the profit, and the difference is 108,000. So who thinks this is an adverse variance, and who thinks this is a favourable variance? Right, okay, let's broadcast. Excellent, well done. Unanimous. Indeed, it is adverse. Although we've made a lot more money than the original budget, for that volume of sales, we should have done more still. Bearing in mind that, you know, you could have had a campaign to increase sales temporarily. So these could be sales that you would have got later, but at a higher price. So there's one last job that we do. Let's fill in that that's adverse. This isn't essential. It's probably not something that an exercise will ask you to do. But what's worth doing is reconciling that the difference in our profit of 1082 and 974 is actually explained by the variances. If we reconcile one against the other, that'll give us a reasonable degree of confidence that we've got things right. So if we look, we've got a shortfall on revenue of 90, material saving of 10, labour adverse of a favourable, fixed overhead. If we net that lot off, 90 less 10 plus 20 less 2 plus 10 gives us 108. There we go. And sure enough, the difference in profit, 108. As we say up here, job's a good one. And that concludes the session. Does anybody have any questions? Or have we really nailed it, everybody? Let's see what's coming in on the chat. All good? Well, hey. Thank you, Sarah. That's good to hear. Thanks, Jody. Ah, my favourite words, Rachel. Perfect sense. Well, I think at that point, yeah, this is terrific. Excellent. Excellent. We've invested our time well, everybody. In that case, at that point, I'll switch off the microphone now, and I'll say thank you for listening, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon. Good night, everybody.